I will. That Sunday morning played out exactly how Saturday did. She woke up frustrated and hot again. It was so hot messaging her and getting her a drippy mess. I did not realize at that time, but she was chatting with me on her anniversary, touching herself, thinking of what I would do to her. As the week went on, my desire for her grew. I scheduled a visit with one of my company's branches in New York. I told my wife that I was going to be gone on business in a week from Thursday to Tuesday. I mailed my personal concierge and had them get a suite prepared for me with a prepared wardrobe for a female guest that I have staying with me. A few days later, Susan heard a knock on her door. When she opened it, she was greeted by a FedEx driver who was asking for her signature. She was not expecting a package and she did not recognize the sender address. She opened the package and was surprised to see a very sexy red strappy lacy lingerie set, red thigh-high stockings, and red high heels. There was also a bottle of very sexy Coco Chanel perfume. She instantly blushed as she opened the letter that was the package. She saw that there was a gift card to the nicest nail salon and hairstylist in town. Dear Susan, this is your biggest fantasy becoming real. I will be at the Four Seasons in New York from the 14th through the 19th. Leave your car with the valet. I have left instructions with the staff for when you arrive. You do not need to bring anything else. I will have everything you need for the weekend. Let me show you everything that you deserve and are missing and desiring. Your fantasy man, Jackson. Susan quickly shut the box and hid it in her closet. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The adrenaline was rushing through her. She could not believe that I would actually do this or that this is happening in real life. She is a good wife, but she also could not stop the feeling of desire and lust that was creeping in. Her mind was so conflicted with guilt for even entertaining this idea, and yet her panties were soaked. Throughout the day, all she could think about was the box that was in her closet, even though she had done her best to ignore it. She did everything to try and forget about it. Her curiosity drove her back to the closet. She was shaking with adrenaline as she pulled the box out of her hiding place. She opened the box up slowly, looking at everything that I had sent her. She opened the letter and read it over and over. She could feel herself getting wet with anticipation. She opened the perfume and was going to smell it when her phone went off. The ringtone was her husband's and it made her jump, causing her to spritz the perfume on her.
Hey honey. Oh, nothing? Sorry, you just scared me. What? I thought we were going to go out and have fun tonight. Yes, I'll have dinner ready for you when you get home. Love you too, bye.
She leaned against the counter. She was so excited about going out and now he just wants to sit at home. She felt defeated. The smell of the perfume started to fill the closet. The scent was intoxicating to her and took her mind away from her life and filled it with the fantasy of New York. The fantasy of my hands on her body. Of the ecstasy that she would be experiencing getting drilled by another man. She snapped back to reality when she realized that he would be home in 20 minutes. She quickly put everything back into the box and hid it again. She worked her magic and had a great meal prepared like a good wife. Maybe she would get lucky tonight, she thought. That was what she needed to take her mind off of New York. As he got home, she noticed that the perfume still lingered all over her. She breathed in deep, taking in the scent and what it was doing to her mind. She had a seductive smile across her face. She wanted to see if he would even notice that she was wearing a new perfume. She bounced right up to him and gave him a big hug and a kiss. He walked in and sat down in his chair. He did not notice anything new about her. She felt disappointed and neglected. Her mind snapped back to the box every time she smelled her perfume. The lust and desire was building in her. She needed this more than anything she has ever needed. She needed to feel alive again. The night ended how she figured it would. Alone with hubby scrolling social media. As the weekend came closer, Susan could not stop thinking about it. She mustered up the courage and sent Evan a text telling him that she was going to go to New York for a girls' weekend with some of her friends from work. She already decided that if Evan were to say anything or ask her to stay, she would. When Evan replied okay, that is when she knew she was doing this. She needed more in her life. She booked the nail and hair appointments. She was going to look like a knockout. I checked into my hotel and examined the room. It was on the top floor and was a multi-room suite. Everything was high-end about this room. I began to unpack and wondered if she was actually going to show up. My last message to her was, "Hey, gorgeous. Just letting you know I landed in New York and I'm checking into the hotel. Let me make this fantasy come true. While I was settling into my suite, Susan was waving goodbye to Evan as he left for work. She went back inside and right to her closet. She opened it and pulled out the lingerie set. She could feel the lust and desire rushing through her as she ran her fingers over the straps and red lace. She stripped her clothes off and started to put on this exotic lingerie set. Once she had the parts in place, she turned around and saw herself in the mirror for the first time. She gasped at how hot she looked in this set. She was not expecting to feel so hot in this outfit. She hasn't felt this good since her honeymoon. Susan started thinking about how wrong this was and how she was a good innocent wife. She thought to herself,
I can't do this. I can't cheat on my husband.
That when she looked at herself while starting to slowly remove the lingerie that was bought for her by another man, the desire started to pull her in the other direction. She pulled out the perfume bottle and thought,
No matter what, I'm going to smell good today.
Once she spritzed her neck with the perfume, her mind snapped back to her fantasy. She felt herself get wet instantly. The scent took over her mind. She needed this weekend more than anything in her life. She found a sexy red dress that accentuates and shows off her incredible cleavage and flares out at her hips. She finished her makeup and laced up her high heels. She remembered the instructions from the letter. She did not need to bring anything. She got into her car and started driving towards New York. Once she arrived, the valet opened her door. Welcome to the Four Seasons, Miss Susan. She was surprised that he knew who she was. As she walked into the hotel, the doorman welcomed her by name. She had never seen service like this before. She was not able to get to the front desk before the hotel manager called over a bellhop to escort her to my suite. When the elevator opened, the bellhop walked her to the door and said, I hope you enjoy your stay, Miss Susan. He then left her standing right in front of my door. Her heart started pounding. It was so quiet on the floor that she could hear it in her ears. The adrenaline started pumping through her. She was battling with herself again. She knows how wrong this is. She knows that there will be no turning back once she knocks on this door. She takes a deep breath and smells that intoxicating perfume again for the first time since getting into the hotel. The smell took over her mind. Desire took over her body. That feeling of being noticed, that feeling of being desired by a man flooded her body. She felt herself dripping with anticipation and lust. She felt the hot rush of her cheeks blushing. She raised her hand and knocked. Her heart raced and her breath left her body as the echo of her decision rang through the hall. I was sitting on the couch catching up on some work emails when I heard a knock at the door. My heart raced as I knew this was Susan knocking on my door. I was wearing a dark blue suit coat and a button-down shirt. As I walked to the door, I took a deep breath. I could feel myself growing out of the pure lust of what was about to happen. I opened the door and saw the most stunning woman standing in front of me. She was wearing a red dress and heels. She had the biggest and most nervous smile on her face. Her eyes lit up when she saw how sexual and beautiful she was to me. I could see her incredible cleavage rising and falling as she breathed heavily. Hi Susan, I was hoping you would show up, I said, not able to take my eyes off of her. Her cheeks lit up even more as she smiled even bigger. She replied,
Hi Jackson, I shouldn't be here, but I had to see you.
Well, you're even more gorgeous than your pictures, I said.
Really?
She said, blushing even more. Oh yes, come in, I said, taking a step back and allowing her to enter the room. She stepped into the room and turned to face me as I closed the door. As she passed, a wave of her perfume washed over me. The scent drove me wild. I took her purse and phone, placing them on the coffee table. The whole time, never breaking eye contact with her. I could see her nervousness turn into lust as I stepped towards her. She backs up until her back is pressed against the entryway table. She is staring into my eyes as she feels my fingers slide over her left hand, brushing her wedding ring and slowly up her arm. I hear her gasp as she feels me for the first time. You smell so good, baby, I whisper to her. I lean in and kiss her. I feel her warm lips as they hesitantly kiss me back. I feel her moan into our kiss as my tongue flicks over her lips. She gives into the lust and control I had over her. My hands start exploring her body as she wraps her arms around my neck, pulling me in. My body pressed against hers, I slide my hands down to her rear. Her dress was short enough that my hands grabbed her bare skin. I could feel that there was a lacy fabric covering her bottom. She whimpers between our kissing.
Oh my, I can't believe we are doing this. What are we doing? We are married, Jackson.
I grabbed her hips and spun her around. She gasped at the sudden lack of control and firmness at which I controlled her. Her hands slapped onto the table as she felt me press against her bottom, and my hands started to explore her body. She pressed her back into me and threw her head back onto my shoulders as my hands slid up her stomach and over her amplage, into her neck where I wrapped my hand around it. She felt completely helpless. Her eyes were closed as I started to kiss her neck and jawline, started sucking and biting on her, driven wild by her scent. Her hair falling over my face as she melted into my touch. Her left arm wrapped around my head, pulling me into her neck. She pressed her rear back into me and started grinding against me as my hands wrapped around her huge amplage for the first time. The tips were so hard I could feel them through her dress and bra. Her face was red with desire and her moans escaped her mouth, telling me that she needed this more than anything. She opened her eyes and saw that there was a mirror directly in front of her. She could not take her eyes off of how sexual and slutty she looked, with another married man sucking on her neck and groping her. Again, without warning, I bent her over a table. She gasped at how firmly I controlled her body. She never experiences this control from her husband. She moaned out as my hands grabbed her hips and flipped up her dress. There she was, a married woman, bent over a table, dress flipped up over her hips, in front of a married man who was not her husband. She felt a rush shoot through her as she felt her glory soak her undies. "That is my good little girl," I tell her as I grab her bottom, wearing the lingerie set that I bought for you. Her rear looked incredible in the red lace and straps that made up her thong and garter belt. She looked back over her shoulder at me as I slapped her rear. She gasps in pleasure. I knelt down behind her and leaned in, kissing her, slowly sucking and biting my way towards her glory. She moaned out, feeling me get closer. She was so turned on. I slowly pulled her undies to the side and grabbed a cheek in both hands, exposing all of her married glory. I leaned in and kissed her perfection. She gasped at the feeling of me being buried in her. She pushes back against me as she feels my tongue exploring her. She has never felt this before, and it was better than she ever imagined. The excitement of her affair and the lust drove her to the edge of an arrival. She looks up, still bent over the table, and sees herself in the mirror. Her eyes are glazed over with lust, her cheeks flushed with blood, her mouth gaping open as she is moaning out louder than she ever does at home. She knows I am about to give her something she has never experienced. She needs this.
Oh, Jackson, I'm going to explode.
She screams out as she grabs the back of my head. Her whole body shakes for the first time in her life by the touch of another man. She collapses on the table as row that has been building in her body and mind for a month explodes through her. She laid on the table trembling.
Oh my God, Jackson, that was incredible. I've never arrived so hard in my life.
Elle picked her up and carried her to the couch. When I sat her down, she wrapped her arms around my neck and began making out with me.
Thank you, Jackson. Thank you, thank you.
She starts stripping my suit coat off and starts unbuttoning my shirt.
Oh baby, I'm not done with you.
She lays down and feels me lift her thighs over my shoulders. She moans out as she feels me pull her undies to the side again as I dive into her. Oh Susan, you taste amazing. She looks down at me and moans out as she locks eyes with me. Her eyes roll back as she throws her head back and arrives again, her body shaking as another row rushes through her. As she came down, she sat up, lifted her dress over her head, and tossed it to the ground.
Damn,
is all I hear as I look at her body in the lingerie set I bought her. The red lace and straps on her tan skin looks incredible. The straps contoured her curves so perfectly. I dove into her again. The look of her perfect face was so incredible. The sight of my left hand and my wedding ring on her sexy rear end drove me wild. We went at it like this for a few more minutes and she arrived again. She collapses on the couch as I get on my knees between her legs. She sees me undo my belt and pull it off. She sits up and starts opening my pants.
Oh my.
I grab her face and start kissing her deeply. I push her back down and tell her to get ready for me. All of a sudden, her phone starts vibrating on the coffee table next to us. Her screen lights up with Evan's name. Her eyes dart from her phone to my tool. Can see she has a flash of guilt cross her face as her phone continues to vibrate on the table. While her phone is vibrating, I tell her what I want her to do next. How I want her to touch herself, and how I want her to touch me. She moaned, and a look of pure lust crosses her face. She needed it. I'd eased her until she couldn't stand it any longer, and I lowered myself onto her. All of a sudden, her phone goes off again. She nervously looks at her phone and sees it Evan again. She had forgotten to call him and tell him she made it safe. I pause, waiting to see if she still wanted this. She could say no now, and her marriage vows would be bent, but not broken. I could see the battle of guilt that was going on inside her. I felt her fingers trace me as the phone continued to buzz. Once it stopped, she tossed it across the room and looked at me with lust in her eyes and said,
"Take me, Jackson."
I slowly pleasured her, her body reacting to every inch of me. She could not stop moaning and gasping as she feels another man for the first time in her life. I move my body between her legs as I start to grope her amplitude. We are both moaning into each other as we make out. I feel her clench down on me as her breath leaves her body. Her eyes roll back into her head as her body tenses, her body shaking hard. She gasps as she breaths for the first time through her whole low. As she comes down from the biggest arrival she has ever had, she whimpers,
"Jackson, you are so amazing."
"Baby, you are so good that I am not going to be able to last," I whisper to her as I kiss her.
"I'll take that as a compliment."
Finally we both collapsed, panting heavily. Those arrivals taking everything we had out of us. "Susan, that was the best I have ever had," I whisper to her. She had the biggest smile on her face. Her cheeks were so red and her hair was all a mess. All of a sudden, her phone buzzes again. She crawls over to the phone and sees it's Evan again. She also sees she missed several texts making sure she was okay. She knew she needed to answer.
"I have to answer this. If I don't, he will start calling my friends."
She was sitting on the floor, leaned against the couch naked as she answers her husband's call.
"Hey babe. Yes, I'm sorry I forgot to text or call, but I made it." "What?" "No, I am not ignoring you. I've just been having the best time getting all of the therapy I've been needing for years."
I was so roused watching her talk to her hubby while touching herself. I walk over to her and start kissing her amplitude and rubbing her glory. She couldn't control herself.
"Hey babe, I got to go. I love you too."
Round 2. Susan and I enjoyed each other a few more times that weekend. We're planning on seeing each other again next month. As of now, my wife is none the wiser. I'm still into her, and I give it to her whenever she lets me. And Susan's husband, well, at the time I'm telling you this, is still spending his free time on social media instead of pleasing his wife. His loss is my gain. What he won't do, I will.